Daniel, we ask the same question to all of our guests as a way to introduce them. Who are you? And what possibilities are you seeing in this moment that has you wake up and do your work every day?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Really glad to be here with you all. For those who are eating lunch, you're in good company. I'm also going to be snacking a little bit too. I know it's the lunch hour here on the East Coast. So my name's Daniel. I use he, him pronouns, and I grew up in Durham, North Carolina, and I've been living out in the Bay Area the last 5 years. And one thing to know about me is I've recently moved back this past summer out of the call to do everything I can to ensure a good outcome out of this election, which for me means progressive victories. It means defeating Trump. It means taking back the Senate. But it also means engaging a lot more people in the political process and helping more and more people shift from being passive observers of our political system to active participants, where we remember that we can help shape these systems and help bend them, and how Dr. King describes it, bend them towards justice. So I moved back to North Carolina. I'm currently working as a field organizer with a progressive statewide group in North Carolina, where we're working to organize working class people, communities of color, low frequency voters, young people throughout the state to vote, but not only vote, but to build a lasting movement in North Carolina for progressive change. And that includes electoral work, of course, getting out the vote. It also includes holding our elected officials accountable once they are in office to really work for us. I met Seth and Jess and Anastasia through a coaching training program that we all did a couple of years back. So I'm also a trained life and leadership coach, and I've worked with social change leaders throughout the country for about 3 years now, mostly folks doing climate organizing, human rights work, folks leading organizations, also people who are have a longing in their heart to be making a big impact in the world, but maybe aren't yet in the kind of role that they'd really like and want the help of a coach to help them align their life with their vision. So that's a little bit about me. And as Seth alluded to, one of the questions I'm holding for myself is the question today: how to be present, how to be grounded and intentional and focused while in a moment in our society, a moment in our world where there's a lot at stake and where the work can feel really overwhelming and urgent and daunting. And for me, I don't have the answer to this question, but it's something that I am asking myself every day. How do I not get swept up in the urgency that can be almost destructive, and how to remain connected to something bigger in my organizing.
Thank you, Daniel. Folks, just raise your hand ever so slightly if you ever notice yourself getting kind of swept up in the moment and the urgency of the moment. We're buddies here. Yeah, there are some hands. I got some thumbs up from the people, not yet on video. Yeah, I definitely feel that on a regular basis. I'm so glad we're looking at this question, because it's a good reminder that sometimes it doesn't even feel possible to take a beat and slow down and take a look at, what is the bottom line purpose? What is the underlying direction or aim that has me wake up and do the work that's important to me every day?
Yeah. And to add about, the word urgent is so interesting, because as an organizer, one of my jobs is to help people feel the urgency and get active. If you feel the urgency, it's like, okay, I'm gonna call voters, I'm gonna get out there, I'm gonna donate money, versus the kind of numbness I know I can fall into at some point as things are so overwhelming every day. Urgency, my grandfather loves the root meaning of words. So of course, this morning I looked up the etymology of urgency, and it means, from the Latin urgere, something that's pressing. And it's really the same word as urge. urgency is like doing something out of an urge. And so, many of us, I'm guessing a lot of you here today, have a strong urge to work for justice, to build a world that is sustainable, that's just, where people have their needs met. I know for me, an urge can feel really hot. It's like, I just have this urge for like, ice cream at 10 p.m. or I have this craving for justice, and it's good. It's beautiful. Like having urges, having strong impulses is not a bad thing. However, I think there's something to be said about learning to ground those urges in something bigger. Like an urge can be fleeting, like our teacher Maria talks about, has this beautiful image, or maybe she's referencing a Buddhist teacher that talks about our mind can have the tendency of a candle in a doorway. It's very finicky. And I think our urges are like that too. They aren't as lasting and durable as, say, a big vision for our lives or for the world. So for me, I think about urgency as like, how can we ground that urge in a strategy, in a set of practices, and a culture and a community of practice that lets us channel that urgency in a way that feels more like a good slow burn. Because I know that this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. And one of the ideas that is the most difficult for me to digest, and I want to know if it's difficult for you to digest, is that I don't think that a lot of what I'm working for, we're going to see fully happen in our lifetimes. And that's hard. I really want to. I want to see what we're working for yesterday. I want to see it this fall. But when I look to leaders who I really admire, my former mentor, current mentor, Dale, who was a teacher of mine in college, Nelson Mandela, people like Assata Shakur, they talk about how this is a marathon. This is not like, I'm going to get active and 1 month later we're going to win everything. And so I think it's important to approach our organizing even in moments of urgency and high stakes with that long view. And I wanted to share a quick story about that, if that's okay. Do I have time for a story?
Yeah, please.
So young Daniel in college, Shay Reister was there for this story. So yay, Shay. I have two good friends. Shay is a good friend from college, from my first college experience in Boston, and Edward on the call is a friend from my second college experience in Boulder, Colorado. So really glad you're both here. So I was a college student. I had become active as an organizer, working on a fossil fuel divestment campaign. And I was feeling pissed off that after a year of hard work, we hadn't won. And I was like, what the fuck? Things are so urgent. Why haven't we won yet? Why are we not divested from fossil fuels? The climate crisis is getting worse. And I was hot. I had an urge. And I was like, let's do something drastic. Let's do something big. And let's do it now. And contrary to my, that inner voice of wisdom that's more quiet and has a bit of a more wisdom to share, we decided to plan a direct action on our campus very quickly with maybe 2 or 3 days notice, where we were going to disrupt an info session of prospective students and parents. And we had a plan to go in and say, okay, this is great, you're talking about sustainability, but can you answer for us, why are we investing millions of dollars in the oil and gas industry? Isn't this out of line with our values and who we say we are? And this could have gone really well, right? Like it could have been a good idea. But we were acting from that urgency where we hadn't really taken a moment to pause and act, well, how would this land? How would or would this not be strategic? And because we went in there fast and hot, we ended up personally attacking the individual staff member who was leading the info session and getting into more of an argument with her, that rather than highlighting Tufts's hypocrisy in a supportive way, it kind of made us look argumentative, and it made her look almost like the victim, like we were kind of almost harassing her in a way that not a great look, Some parents were yelling at us, shut up, we just want to hear about Tufts. Can't you go take this conversation somewhere else? Got kind of heated. And then we left. And in my urgency, we uploaded the video to YouTube as a private video to debrief and be like, all right, how did this go? What went wrong? What could we do better next time? and I accidentally uploaded it as a public video. And I was at a party that night and checked my email at a party. I don't know, I'm such a nerd. And I saw maybe 40, 50 emails from YouTube. New person's commented on your video. Such and such has commented on your video. And within about 24 hours, it had gone viral and had 10,000 views. There was no context in the video of what we were doing. And it basically made us look not so great. It did not, I'd say it detracted us from our goals. And the student newspaper said, why was the student group yelling at the info people? And, is this really the kind of Tufts we want to be? Of course, then we took down the video, but it had been reposted on other websites. It's still out there somewhere. And really, it set us back. And for me, when I talked to my mentor, Dale, about it, he said, these times are very urgent, so we must slow down. And he said, the motto of the effective social change leader is make haste slowly. And he was sort of offering these paradoxes of how do you hold the urgency, but not act on your urges and impulses like that in a way that loses sight of what you're really trying to accomplish. So I learned a lot from that experience and learned a lot about the importance of just taking that moment to say, wait a minute, okay, before we go out and do this, let's look together at some different perspectives, and let's talk about how we can ground this urgency in something that will really work. And that's been, that was 2013. That was, 8 years ago. I'm still holding that question. I've learned a little bit about it since then. But it's still, I think I'm learning it at a deeper level this time in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that story, Daniel. I resonate with that so much. Having those moments where I moved a little bit too quickly, thinking that moving quickly was the thing to do. And then looking back and saying, ooh, I just did more harm than good. I know Jess has been there. I know Anastasia's been there.
Yeah.
I know Shay's been there.
Just once or twice.
Yeah. Highlighting the importance of I love that you presence that idea of urge. It's like it kind of like puts these blinders on us, kind of gives us this tunnel vision, so we don't even see. It's not even in our field of view that slowing down a little bit and taking a breath might actually be the most strategic thing to do. So folks, I want to, we got a good, another hour together of this beautiful stuff we're already talking about. Like, isn't this already so rich? I love when we can open with a story, because it just kind of puts us in that place of the experience. So I imagine folks are already calling to mind some similar experiences from your own change making, of maybe moving a little too quickly, and perhaps some desire to be bringing a bit more presence and intention to your work. What we're gonna do is actually in a moment break you off into buddies, because something we love to do at Radical Support Collective is give you a chance to actually talk to somebody, so you can have this experience of community. So it's not just a few of us talking for this whole time. And what I want you looking at when you're in buddies here is, bottom line, what would you love to get from being here today? You might already be getting some things, but what would you love to really be able to walk away from this time, given the question that we're looking at together? So what would you love to get from being here today? We're going to give you 6 minutes, and we're going to let you know about halfway through, if you haven't switched yet, when to switch, but also feel free just to have a conversation if that's what you'd like to do. Jess, are you ready to put people into breakouts?
I am ready.
Great. So after breakouts, we're going to come back, just hear from a couple people what you'd love to get for yourself. We'd also love everybody to put a couple thoughts in the chat of what you'd love to get for yourself. So kind of put in your mind so we can see that. And by the way, you're going to get the chat after this. So use the chat as a place to record your ideas, questions, thoughts that you might want to come back to, and we'll send it to you so that you can be really present with us and engaged in the space. And we're going to continue the conversation with Daniel, and we'll do some wrap up, next steps after that. So we're going to send you off into breakouts. What would you love to get out of being here today? Jess, send us away.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'd love to hear from just, one or two people. What are you seeing you'd love to get out of our conversation here today? Whoever would like to go can just come off mute.
I guess I'll go.
Please.
Hi everybody, I'm Lauren. I'm in Brooklyn as well. And so I think what I'm realizing, so I'm a public defender in the Bronx and do pretty urgent but long-term strategy on behalf of my clients regularly. That's kind of our whole approach. I don't know if my internet is bad. Hopefully you
You're
guys
doing
can still
okay.
hear me.
Yeah.
We can
Keep
hear
going.
you.
Okay. Somehow in my day-to-day work on behalf of, fighting to get my clients out of jail or help them navigate all of these crazy systems, I'm totally able to maintain the perspectives that Daniel was talking about with regard to like being strategic. I think that's how my brain was trained in my legal work, and slowly and guiding my clients to help them kind of reach the mental space that they need to be in to deal with all of the struggles that they're facing. But in my own personal life with the issues that I'm trying to work on behalf of outside of criminal defense and prison reform and jail reform, and I really struggle with trying to kind of figure out how to do anything beyond just like going crazy, doing phone banking for 3 nights, and then I get completely burned out, and writing letters, and it doesn't feel like I'm doing anything that's making any like lasting impact. And I think that's probably because my work on behalf of my clients takes a lot of my energy too. But I would love to come out of this with kind of getting myself unstuck from that space in my personal life and being able to kind of slow down all the other issues and take the same approach. So to come out of this with like some sense of the larger work that's being done that Daniel was talking about to create like a self-sustaining movement that has a longer term impact as opposed to just these immediate easy action items that everybody talks about. So I'm eager to learn more about Daniel's work and just kind of generally be inspired to slow down.
Yeah, great. Perfect, Lauren. Thank you. Thank you for that. Let's hear from one more person. Just come off mute and talk with us. Or Jess or Daniel, you can read the question that we got from Ava.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from some more of y'all so I can know what y'all are bringing, what y'all would love to get out of today. And I'll pull up Ava's question too.
Great. Edward, Ryan, what would y'all love to get out of being here today? Let's go for it, Ryan.
I'll jump in. My partner, or my breakout buddy, and I kind of talked about both coming to this, being interested in how Radical Support Collective is kind of approaching this work and finding a sense of community in balancing that urgency and calling, but in a healthy, healing way, I guess, because traditionally activism work has turned me off because of the culture around it, or just feeling like I'm a more, I guess, just searching for my place in, change work. So I think we both kind of talked about finding community and maybe honing in our place in this type of work and balance that urgency and need with not perpetuating the kind of culture that has gotten us into these spaces of just urgent, destructive,
Yep.
infuse wisdom into this work, I guess. So.
Yep. Can you see, folks, that you're not alone in some of these questions and thoughts that you're having about how to be in this time? We're not, none of us is alone in thinking some of these questions. And I love that you put it just so succinctly, Ryan, of how to find that balance of urgency and calling. And Daniel, I want to kick that over to you because, I so admire how you've been playing all out for this election in this moment. And I've been so inspired, right, by you moving across the country, moving to North Carolina, picking up a a full-time job with Planned Parenthood, if there were a front line for this election, you're definitely on it. So I would love to hear, regarding this balance of urgency and calling, what are you learning as you are engaging with your election work?
Good question. Good question. Yeah. Before I answer directly, I just want to say, Lauren, thank you for the work you're doing in New York. Talk about the long game. I have a friend who's a public defender, and it sounds like really important and challenging work. So thanks for what you're doing. And thanks for all the questions. So I think, Ryan, you're right that there can sometimes be a culture in activist groups, some groups, not all of them for sure, that is, driven by urgency in a way that's a little more driven. And it can sometimes look like, well, to say it this way, my dream of social movements is that we are kind of embodying the kind of world we want to create and how we organize, the way that we treat each other, the way that we communicate with each other, the way we live our lives reflects the values that we're working for of justice and interdependence and just, ending oppression and harm that is so present throughout our society. And that's a tall order, it's like, how do you build a culture that's very different from the one we're raised in? That's a tall order. So I think the first thing that I try to bring to this work is compassion when people are in that more frantic, urgent, stressed place. And it's like, yeah, that's the water we're swimming in, a lot of us. And I can appreciate how someone might feel overwhelmed and panicked by these times. And I know that the worst days I've had as an organizer since I started in May were the days I was really like judgmental and critical of the people around me for them being frantic and urgent. I'm like, God, like what's wrong with you, man? Like, why can't you just be more like grounded in some bigger vision? Like, what's your problem? Those have been the worst days, because that's when I've been a little pissy and contributed to the urgency. So I think for me, what I've been learning is the first step is to be compassionate and understanding when people bring that. And it's like, yep, I see where you're at. And recognizing that maybe that isn't who they are, but that's just how they're showing up in that moment. I've also found it really important to be clear with myself about what the goals are in what I'm doing. Because I think that, I know for me, maybe for some of you, having a really clear picture of what I'm setting out to do helps me settle down and focus. And I think part of why I feel, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like the Buddha under the tree and 1 being like panicking at every minute at every headline, I would say I'm like between like a 5 and an 8 on any given day through this election cycle. And I think part of it is I have some guardrails of like, what is in my control? What are we building towards? What are we actually doing? And how will, achieving that goal matter? And then everything else is a distraction. There's what matters, and there's that which distracts us from what matters. And those are the only 2 kinds of things. That's one way to look at it. And so to be really specific, like I find that by like acknowledging how what I'm doing is making a difference, like, wow, I brought 3 volunteers in and they're really excited to lead an event, and that event is going to lead to contacting 50, 100 voters in this really important county in North Carolina. By like acknowledging that, it helps me kind of relax and be like, okay, like, yes, things are urgent. Like, yes, this needs to be successful, but look what we've done so far. And like, okay, the next goal is to get 3 more volunteers tomorrow. And that kind of almost keeping my head down almost, and not falling down the rabbit hole of, trying to figure out everything all the time. So yeah, I'd invite folks to look for themselves at where might you want to get more focused and clear in your goals, in your activism, be it with your day job, or be it in electoral organizing you're trying to do, or you are doing in your free time. Where might you narrow the scope and be really clear with yourself, like, I'm gonna phone bank 3 hours a week, and that is the impact I'm gonna make. And when the time comes, I'm gonna do it, rather than panicking about if I'm doing enough. So you can, Go ahead.
What I love about what just landed with me in my heart a little bit about what you're saying, Daniel, is the gentleness with which I hear you kind of learning to talk to yourself. It's the like, yeah, there's these big things I care a whole awful lot, and let me focus my attention right now on 3 hours of making calls. You're not saying I'm going to sign up for an organization and spend every single night from now until the election making calls. You're saying, let me just put my attention on what is the next piece. And it's a little sweeter.
Yeah. And a lot of the driven urgency, my view is it comes from how we talk to ourselves and what we choose to focus on in our heads. Not to say that the urgency isn't very real out there in the world. The stakes, I'm not going to go into what is at stake in this election in this conversation, because I know you all already get it. But the franticness can sometimes come from the way we talk to ourselves. And I feel really lucky to have friends and teammates and family members and a coach who helps me bring that gentleness and helps me remember my purpose and the goals when I lose sight of it. For anyone out there who thinks you can do this on your own, you are wrong. I don't think it's possible to create a culture of collaboration and harmony and grounded purposefulness as an individual. I think it has to be through relationships. It has to be, you got to find those friends if you don't have them. Hopefully y'all do. Maybe Seth and Jess and Anastasia can be your friends in that to help, keep you grounded. There are days when I am freaking the fuck out, really, and my mind is racing a million miles a minute and things feel really urgent. And I might be prone to make some of those kinds of mistakes, like the story I shared. And it's through having friends that I can talk to who can help me remember some of what I've said, or just ask me, like, what's the thing that you can control that you could be proud of doing today as well. So it's I'd say creating those relationships is, I would say, the most important thing.
Yeah. Can I just share what I'm getting?
Please.
You, Daniel, thank you so much for just talking through this and being very candid about things that I know I've experienced in myself, especially as we get closer to election day, and it seems like other folks have experienced on this call. One of the things I appreciate, you named both urgency and numbness so far in this call, and I know I've gravitated between the two. Like some days I'm like not in touch with the urgency and the tremendous scale, if I can say that, of this election and of all the things that are happening in our world right now. It's easy to just close off and not feel those things. And then, when I open myself back up to it, then the urgency comes flooding in. Like, oh my God, the crises. And I see like Ananya nodding and Shay nodding. So I'd love to hear folks, if you all are also resonating with some of this. I want to hear what other folks are thinking. But I want to tie this to, I'm appreciating you say, oh, and then I look at what's the one next thing I can do? Is it bringing this new volunteer in? Is it bringing the next 3 volunteers in? Is it my piece of phone banking? Is it my piece of whatever it may be? how whether it's numbness or urgency, that refocusing on, and what do I want my next step to be, can just be an antidote to both of those.
Thank you, Anastasia. I'm seeing nods. I would love to hear if a couple of you would come off mute and just let us know, what are you seeing about all this?
Just one thing I notice in my body is like how soothed my nervous system is when I do just have like one clear like next step I'm committing to, as opposed to like being in the like, oh my God, Trump's gonna steal the election. Oh my God, we're all fucked. Like, just because I think that's just like true for our biology, you know, like when we're, as Dan said, like there's something about keeping your head down that is actually, that like keeps us sane, you know, because we're not we didn't evolve to think about like massive, you know, kind of like uncontrollable events that we can't personally affect. But when you make it just the affectable, you know, like the one thing that I can affect, there's huge relief. Yeah, there's huge relief. And I felt relief just hearing that a couple different times. And so I'm sending 200 texts from home today, you know, to Florida voters. That's like my one. I'm like, I'm gonna check that box off. You know, that's how I'm contributing today.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Ryan.
I really appreciate hearing that, Shay. I feel that a lot too. And I guess a question for the group is like, how do you trust that those small actions, or that what you chose is the right thing or worth your time? Because I just get there all the time like, did I really do it? You know, how do you trust?
I can say something real quick. So we had we were voting for the primary for like local elections here in Boston, and we were getting flooded by the Ed Markey people. Like I literally got like 8 texts and phone calls from them, and yeah, the very last text that I got was like at 7 p.m. the night of, and I had like, even though I had all those reminders, it was that text that was like, oh shit, I got to get out there, and I got out there and I took my mom, and like, yeah, it was good. Like that person sending that text made a difference. So I think you know, it does always make a difference to do something, you know, better than doing nothing always. And also I would add, I think something I think contributes to this sense of I don't know, where things just feel like super dreadful and like we don't know what to do. I think a lot of it is coming from the overall hostility that we have in our political environment right now. Because if you think about it, right, when you're facing a problem, but you kind of know that we're all trying to solve it, we're all in this together, it's like, okay, well, it's a problem, but let's do something. But I think that a lot of it, the frustration comes when you're just like, wow, but like these people just want to do nothing, or these people want to just sabotage this. And you know, I was talking to Shay in the breakout room. I resonate a lot with what Ryan was saying. Like I think my focus during this whole time has been, how do we like, just thinking strategically, like how do we really work with people who are very different than us, and how do we talk to them, and how do we kind of cultivate an attitude of like compassion and curiosity, instead of this contempt for other people. So yeah.
You might want to, I'll make a shameless plug for our earlier circle, which was all about that exact question, Edward, about how do we see with compassionate eyes when it seems that there is so much hatred in the world, with one of our dear friends, Beth Ann Suggs. So, maybe we can include that. Maybe one of my buddies can include a note about that to share that in the follow-up email, because we had a great conversation about exactly that. Lauren, please, what are you seeing here?
Do you mind if I jump in with another thought?
I'd be delighted. Please.
Edward, I think what you were saying, just about every little bit helps, kind of also made me think about even just the times that I've told myself, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I actually sit down and start making a few calls or writing a few letters. It's kind of like even just getting over the little hump of the first few is such a relief also. And it just like, it's hard to get to that place sometimes, but when you just like let yourself get going a little bit, I think it does open you up to doing more. And then similarly along the lines of talking, I think talking to people that you're very different from, I have found that the times that I've tried to be different than myself in like coming in with a canned thing to say or something that someone's told me to say feels off and I don't necessarily connect with what I'm doing. But the times that I've just decided to kind of chat as opposed to following a script when I've made calls or other work, I have been able to connect with people much more and the conversations feel a lot more genuine. So I think that's also freeing in a lot of ways and has been, I can just feel myself kind of relax into it a little more when I'm not trying to remember other people's words. So yeah, there's a resistance factor that you have to push through, I think.
I want to jump in here too. Ryan, your question to the group, I'm so grateful for it, because as you were asking it, I had this flashback to all of these sessions I've had with clients and friends about like, but what could I do that could possibly be enough in this moment? Right? And I wonder if some other folks here maybe have had that thought at some point or another. I know I have many times. And I like to ask them in that question, what would enough even be? Like, I think there is no such thing. Like, there is so much happening. There's so much that we yearn to give to our world, so much we're experiencing as this is happening. There is no such thing as enough, would be my take on it. But there is what's yours, which would be an empowering way to shift, right? Like if I'm looking at what's enough, then like we've been talking about, then I'm going to be in the state of urgency all the time. If I'm paying attention to something else, if I'm paying attention to the question, what is mine to give here, then my way of being with looking at what the opportunities are for me to take action is going to be very different, right? I'm going to be looking, like Lauren was saying, about like I'm going to be looking at like, what is the thing that I most yearn to give? What is the thing that I can right now in the 10 minutes that I have? And then you can do that again and again and again, right? And that may change over time. But I've just found that what is mine versus like what is needed is a really empowering way to shift where the question we're asking as we look at this, because of course there's what we are looking at is indeed urgent, right? And we're not serving what we're serving in the way that we seek to if we're being and embodying that urgency.
Daniel, I see you nodding your head. What say ye?
Yeah, there's so much wisdom in this group and what all of y'all are saying. First, I wanted to come back to something Anastasia said about the experience of either numbness or like urgency. And I just want to say, I think both of those states are absolutely normal and okay. I think that sometimes we kind of get a little disconnected and numb out on what's happening as a coping mechanism because it's too much. And there's nothing wrong with that. And when we really face what's happening, an initial reaction of, holy shit, I need to get into frantic action right away is also a natural thing, So there's these kind of two poles of, numbness or urgency. And I don't think we get anywhere by judging either of them as bad. There's something wrong with me that I'm on one of these places. But I do think that the kind of focused, present, intentional action comes from being somewhere in the middle, you know, having coping mechanisms, you know, being able to do things that are fun, that are rejuvenating, not only obsessing about what is unraveling and the crises in our world, and still staying very present to them and taking action. So I think that that was what I had to say about that. And Ryan, in your question, I often think our minds trick us by making things really out of proportion. And it can seem like either I do something that has a massive immediate impact, like the thing, or nothing I do matters. And the truth is, most effective social change work is like we're all a drop in a bucket. And it is work that adds up over time. And we don't always know if it's working at the beginning. You know, I don't always know if the calls I'm making to voters are going to make a difference. There's really no guarantee that we'll win the election out of what I'm doing. And I know it can be, I know for me, I can sometimes, fall into that binary of like, I need to find one thing where I'll see the result immediately, where it'll be so clear that what I've done has changed the world, or nothing I'm doing matters. And it's rarely one of those two. It's rarely one of those two. And I think we need to think as collectives and not individuals, right? I think some writer at some point said the most powerful thing an individual can do to stop climate change is stop thinking as an individual and instead understand that we are like a collective of people. And when we all take action and all play our parts and do what's ours to do, I think that's when we'll see the results that we want in our world. And so the question for me is never like, how can I trust if this is enough? Because I never will if I'm asking that question and being honest. But it's like, what is mine to do? Like, what's the drop in the bucket I can add, knowing that there are, you know, hundreds of thousands, millions of other people organizing in this election as well. And they're doing their own thing. And it's all adding up. And Edward, I love your story about the 8 texts. Thank you for sharing that. The Obama campaign found that if they could have 8 points of contact with a low frequency voter, they could get them to vote. So that would be like 8 different, maybe 3 texts and 2 phone calls and a letter and a Facebook ad. It took 8 different points of contact. And so that's sometimes why your call can be really important. It may not be that in that one call, you'll motivate someone from being a Republican who isn't going to vote to someone who's going to get out and vote and organize for progressive candidates in one 10-minute phone call, but it can be one of the, one of the drops in the bucket that ends up to meaningful change.
And something that I keep reminding myself as I'm making phone calls recently, Pennsylvania, where I live, Donald Trump won Pennsylvania by 44,000 votes. That might sound like a lot. That is a very small number. And so to think that, really every action we take in this moment could have a massive, massive impact. And what's cool about it, we don't get to know. We don't get to know the impact that our actions have because we're part of this collective, because we're part of this whole organism taking action in this moment. And we can just let that go, that we would even get to see our one individual action having, the impact, because it's part of everything else. And so we get to contribute to that. And how cool is that? It's something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I'm seeing some yeses and some misses. So helpful. I'm curious what's helpful for you all in what I'm sharing or others are sharing.
I just love this idea of the drop in the bucket. And I wish I had known that the Obama thought about 8 points of contact before I started doing phone banking, because it can become so lonely and so you can feel so kind of like lost in not connecting with people or in having a very limited chat or not getting a text back. But knowing that actually is part of a collective effort, I think is just so sustaining to know that. So I will definitely carry that with me.
And you can thank a bucket that I learned that lesson from. That's my dumb sense of humor. Is there anyone who hasn't shared who would like to, who we haven't heard from yet?
Maybe Alex or Phoebe or Heidi or Ananya? We're gonna, in a moment actually shift our gears to looking at, Phoebe says in the chat, I'm grateful for those metaphors. Yeah. We're going to shift in a moment to what is like the golden nugget that you would put in your pocket to walk away from this session with. So, kind of plant that in your head and see what you're seeing here, that, how are you going to apply this? I have one more question for you, Daniel, because it's just been kind of ringing in my ears this whole time. It's a little bit out of left field. I didn't prepare us for this question. It's about celebration. We're talking about taking these kind of small steps and putting our attention on small steps and wondering, is it enough? Is it big enough? And kind of having this worried energy sometimes as we're taking smaller steps. But I know for myself, I don't celebrate enough. Like I kind of wait until, if I'm not careful, I'm going to wait until November 4th to celebrate. And, there's a possibility that I won't have things to celebrate then, or there will be more. Even if we win the election, there will be more things to not celebrate, and I'll just kind of keep going, not celebrating the huge contribution that people are making. So I'd love to hear from you. What is celebration looking like for you in this moment as you're taking these step-by-step actions?
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. Raise your hand if you resonate with what Seth is saying, that you maybe don't celebrate and acknowledge the good work you're doing to yourself as much as you maybe would like to. Cool. If you aren't raising your hand, I want to learn from you, because I would. Yeah. Well, what is it that we celebrate? Is it the outcome, or is it what we've done? For me, the guiding question in all of this has been, what can I do to wake up with no regrets on November 4th, no matter the outcome of the election? Like, imagine the worst case scenario, right? If that happened, what would I still have been proud to do? I still would have been proud to move to North Carolina and knock on these doors and get volunteers involved and lead trainings. And so that's a celebration that's less about the outcome that ultimately we don't have final control over. And it's about celebrating what I'm doing. And I think that it's not something a lot of us have developed the skill for. It's hard for me. I mean, is it uncomfortable for you to celebrate what you're doing that's working? It is for me sometimes. It's often my least frequent, muscle that I exercise. And I think it is a muscle. I think that celebration is a skill set that we need to practice. And it may be the most important thing any of us can do to build the resilience to keep going in the times that we're in. So personally, I like to celebrate the numbers. We keep track in my job of how many new shifts did we schedule, how many calls did we make in our region, how many volunteer leaders, moved from being like barely involved to having a leadership role. And every night we report that out. Like, I recruited 15 volunteers. We completed 400 conversations with voters, and we have 5 new volunteer leaders. And I think that's fun to celebrate, to really break it down. And for you, if it isn't the numbers, maybe it's a moment. But I would encourage folks to start to notice, like, what is something I'm doing each day that is working, that I am proud of, that I can be like, wow, yeah, I talked to my more politically apathetic friend and like got them excited. Like, I'm going to celebrate that I did that. Or, I finally figured out where to donate some money, and I donated $15 or $1,500 or whatever your amount is, and just reclaiming our own agency in what we celebrate, right? We're taught, I think, that celebration of ourselves is bad and selfish and self-centering. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's selfish or narcissistic to say, I did a good thing today that I can be proud of. Or we're taught we can only celebrate when we've achieved some big outcome. Like, oh, we won the race, now we can celebrate. But yeah, for me, it's just those little moments. It can be small. And it's often like looking at the numbers in our spreadsheet and being like, cool, this looks pretty good. And sometimes I'll celebrate by playing with my dog and just putting my phone down. I personally feel like moments when I'm away from my phone are like a treat now, because so much of my work is virtual, and that's hard. Y'all, like one of my biggest struggles in all this is not getting to work elbow and elbow with other people in a physical space. But anyway, I'll be like, wow, like we did great. I'm gonna put away my phone for an hour, pick up my guitar, pick up this dog, gonna like reward myself in a way that feels fun for me. Yeah, but I think it's less important what the reward is. Like maybe for you, it's taking a bath. Maybe it's, who knows? Maybe it's eating a pint of ice cream. Maybe it's nothing like that. And it's just internally you acknowledge what you've done. I don't think it really matters what you do to celebrate. You probably know what feels good to you, but it's just the very act of allowing yourself to acknowledge what's working and what results you are producing in your own life that you can be proud of.
And what a way to bring that sense of purpose and intention into your work. It's like by celebrating, how I love to think about it is by celebrating, you're almost kind of replaying the same thoughts that required you to get where you are. So you're kind of strengthening that neural pathway even, so it becomes that much easier next time, right? So really, it's quite a service to ourselves to be able to celebrate. I love, Phoebe, what you put in the chat of getting back to a daily practice of gratitude and daily accomplishments. I know some of us have a win wall, even the tiny things like I took the dog for a walk today, even though I was really, really exhausted. Put on a Post-it note, slap it on the win wall, just acknowledging every small little thing. And what a great way to kind of put our attention on what we want to take away here. So we're going to give folks, let's give folks 3 minutes just to reflect silently on our conversation here today. And what I want you to look at is, what is the golden nugget takeaway that you're taking from this that you'd love to apply in your life? And, think about that, share it in the chat. And I'd also love to hear from folks, as you're thinking about that, what is one small, sweet thing you'd like to promise regarding the election? So go ahead and think about that. And team, I'll be right back.
And while folks are thinking, just want to invite those who are participating in this conversation via Facebook Live to also share your nuggets and your golden nuggets and your promise in the chat, and I'll share some of them with the group here so we can all be together across platforms.
Ananya, would you mind, I'd love to hear your voice in our space here. Would you mind coming off mute and telling us what your golden nugget is here?
Sure. So my golden nugget was to think about climate change and how powerful it is to even just think about it as more of a collective thing, because that's how we got into the mess in the first place, is everyone thinking about it as an individual. And that's like not what like we put ourselves back in that trap, and then we're just like perpetuating all these systems. So like even like the little things of like how we think about things can be an opportunity to practice living in a different way of being in the world. Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you.
You said, and I love all the prints in your background. Is that your art that you made?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
This
is my college collage. I love cutting things out of like college booklets.
Cool. That's great. I'm just reading what's in the chat here. This is all really contributing to me to read these.
Daniel, do you want to read some of them out loud so the folks on Facebook can take part?
Okay. Golden nuggets. Thinking about my drop, what do I have to give, as opposed to freaking out about what is enough. It's awesome. Shay has a good next step, sending 200 texts and then celebrating it and asking friends to do the same. Shout out to Resistance Labs, they're great. All my friends are working over there. Golden nugget, one of the most powerful things we can do while working on climate is to not think about it as an individual. Yes. Thanks for phone banking. Setting goals for each week between now and the election, and then reassessing weekly goals after outcome. Sounds great. Sounds great. Either or thinking keeps me complacent in the not enough mentality and is part of the culture I'm striving to change. I'm gonna read that again. Ryan's takeaway, either or thinking keeps me complacent in the not enough mentality and is part of the culture I'm striving to change. I'm going to sign up for at least one phone banking shift per week between now and the election. Amazing. Getting my groceries in time to chime. Oh, wonderful. The baby steps do count, and like our civil rights heroes, they don't accomplish anything overnight. These are all great. Elaine from Facebook says, my golden nugget is to find value in the experience of finding ways to support organizations fighting against voter suppression through donating and spreading the message. Amazing. Reading the propositions on the ballot. Yeah. And it's like, that's a focused action, right? And that's, my friend who's staying with me right now, she mentioned last night when we were talking about this, she was like, how could you do urgent work and not be present? Like being present is facing what's really happening. You know, being present, it doesn't mean you're like wearing any particular kind of clothes, like sitting cross-legged on the floor. Like being present can be taking a lot of action and researching who you're going to vote for and looking at your goals. Like being present, it just means you're being present to what's really happening in the world, what's present to what you want to be doing. And so, yeah, it's almost like, well, how could you not be present when doing urgent work? Like if you're not present, what are you doing? You're probably freaking out. And that's okay. You're going to. I do. I still freak out. I probably will at some point between after this call and the end of the day, at least once. But by being present with what is before me to do, to focus on, that's what stands out. And all of your steps here are really focused. They're really specific, which I appreciate.
Don't y'all just love Daniel? Isn't he just the best? Like, I'm so glad we found him. You know, I'm so glad he found us, frankly. Can we do some sparkles or, you know, a little bit of applause for Daniel being our just such courageous guest here today? Thank you, friend, for giving your time here. Thank you all for reflecting on what you're getting out of today. We're going to move into a time of just wrap up here and letting you know about what's next with Radical Support Collective and how you can get involved. So Anastasia, if you want to pull up those slides. I want to acknowledge one thing that we didn't put on our slides is actually really relevant and important to this. Our team at Radical Support Collective is doing election action coaching. We didn't even make a slide for that, but we are doing 30-minute, what we call laser coaching sessions with folks to get really clear on what is your plan for election action. You know, what is that series of small sweet steps that you're willing to take between now and November 3rd so that there are just no regrets on November 4th. And we have a whole team of like 9 coaches joining us for this. So we have so much capacity. So please, you know, there's no such thing as scarcity of time here. Sign up for support if you even think you want it. Tell your friends to sign up for support. We want nobody unsupported in being involved in this this time, in this moment. It's all hands on deck. We need to leave everything on the field to guarantee a Biden-Harris victory. So come play with us. radicalsupport.org/election is where you can find out about that coaching for election action. And
can I say something about that?
Please.
I'm so glad y'all are doing that. And I think a lot of you on this call are already clear about the kind of impact that you want to make and already have a plan. And so definitely get more coaching. Always, I'm a coach, so always encouraging it. And also remember that you all are already very clear about the kind of impact you want to make. I can tell. And don't question it. Like, y'all have a very clear picture of how to be grounded and focused and how to take action between now and November. And know that you doing what you put in the chat is going to be seen by others around you, especially if you tell them about it. And by taking clear, focused action and acknowledging it, talking about it with others, you'll be leading by example and inviting them to do the same. Yeah.
Perfectly.
And yeah, definitely sign up. I might have to sign up too sometime between now and when things get crazy in November, because the greatest thing about coaching is sometimes, even when you don't think you need it, you find sweeter, more meaningful, joyous ways to approach things you thought had to suck, but actually don't.
So well said. Thank you.
So well put.
So well put. Thank you, Daniel. Speaking of coaching, I wanted to share another opportunity here. For after the election, this coaching group is going to start on November 11th. So people have just a beat to rest and take a breath after the election. But there's going to be work to do, you know, no matter who's in the White House after November 4th. And so if you'd like a little bit of that, you know, sweet, joyous possibility in your life in a community of other change makers, I'm hosting a coaching group called In It for the Long Haul that Phoebe's been part of before and others have been part of before. And would love to have you with us. There's room for 6 folks, and really giving tools and skills to keep doing the work in a way that is really life-sustaining for yourselves so you can bring that to other people. And yeah, if you're interested in that, drop a note in the chat or check out our website, and we'll send you some follow-up about that as well. And with that, I'll hand it off to Jess.
Great, thanks. And another opportunity for you to get some coaching and be in Sweet Community. This is a program that I'm co-leading with Shay, who's on the call, called We Are the Great Turning. And what we're doing here is we're taking the sweet support of the coaching group format that Seth was just talking about and bringing it together with a body of work created by my teacher, Joanna Macy, who many of you may have heard of. It's called, the body of work is called The Work That Reconnects, and it's all about supporting you and nourishing you by getting connected to the living earth, to your community, to your purpose and what it is that you're here to contribute in the world. The Great Turning is the shorthand in Joanna's work for this transition that we are a part of, from a society that is rooted in oppression and domination to one that is truly life-sustaining. So it's going to be really sweet. We're meeting weekly for 12 weeks, starting on October 12th. So if you're interested in this, get in touch right away. You can also let us know in the chat, either on Facebook or here, or you can go to radicalsupport.org/greatturning, and you and I can set up a one-on-one time to just chat and explore whether or not it's the right fit for you and where you're at in your life right now.
In case you haven't noticed, there's a few coaches on this call. And as Daniel has shared, coaching is a chance to be supported to create the change that you most want to make, especially in this time when we want to know that we're showing up to make the difference that we care about and doing it in a way that keeps us resilient and in this work, even through the uncertainty of the times we're in. So if you'd love to explore one-on-one coaching, you can check out coaching with myself or Seth or Jess at radicalsupport.org /team, or you can just go to radicalsupport.org and you'll find us. And you can also access this, sign up for an election coaching session for free, and you can get a little taste of what the value is of coaching one-on-one toward a goal that means a lot to you. So that could be another avenue in. And the Radical Support Collective team is just so delighted and honored to announce a partnership and a conversation with author Rebecca Solnit, who has just been a prominent voice on hope in the dark. Hope in the Dark is one of her book titles, in fact. And she is joining us around this idea of hope in action in the countdown to election day. So if you are needing that like extra dash of hope that's like grounded the way that we were discussing today, join us for Rebecca Solnit on Thursday, October 8th. That's next Thursday evening at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And you can find more details and share this with everyone you know who cares about the election and the big things we are facing right now. Please just invite everyone you love to join this conversation, a public conversation on Zoom. And that's at radicalsupport.org/Solnit. This will be in the follow-up email. And am I handing this over to Daniel or Jess? I can also do it.
I suppose you're handing it to me. So we're going to also put this in the email list, so in the email we send to you after this, so don't worry. But this is just a bunch of tools that we have, and you'll see the link to at the bottom for the free coaching we've talked about. Our personal favorite organization to just send all of our money to is the Movement Voter Project. So if you're looking for a place to donate, they are amazing. And then there's also at the very top a no regrets action guide that Daniel made that is just awesome. So if you need some support getting clear on like what organizations should I sign up with, who's doing who's like hosting phone banks, who's hosting text banks, where should I give my money, Daniel's guide is the place to go. We'll send it in the email, and we'll also post it in the chat on Facebook so y'all can get it there too. And also, if you have not already done so, we are accepting donations for this and all of our radical support circles. So we value this program at $50, and any amount that you can give is something we are grateful for. Daniel, we didn't decide we were giving that money for you today. We donate 25% of the donations from each program to wherever our guest wants it to go. And it says Movement Voter Project.
That is correct. It's also
all right.
Movement Voter Project. They're supporting a lot of grassroots groups in North Carolina, including the current group I'm working with. They basically take your money and they're connected to really powerful grassroots organizing groups in key states, and they figure out who needs it the most and they get it where it needs to go. So I just said, let's stick with them for this program.
Great. And that's where money for the Rebecca Solnit event will also be going. So we just love Movement Voter Project. And as you'll see, you can Venmo us at Radical Support or paypal.me/Radical Support. And anything you give will help us give some money to Movement Voter Project, and of course, support us at Radical Support to keep these programs going. So we'd be very grateful for any support you can offer. And feedback. this is a new program for us. We're having so much fun with it, and we hope to continue to evolve it based on the value people are getting and the ideas you have or ways that we can continue to improve it. So my request to each of you is to take this link right now that I'm assuming Seth is putting in the chat, or will in a moment, and open the feedback tab. It's a very short Google form, so that before you walk away from your computer when we wrap this up today, you can drop us a few lines about how this was for you today, what you got from it, how we might improve in the future. So thank you in advance for giving us your feedback. It's so, I cannot understate how valuable it is to us. And
that is it.
That's it in terms of
we're on
slides.
slides.
Great. So everyone, as the clock strikes 2 o'clock here on the East Coast, and we are wrapping up, we have a tradition at Radical Support Collective of ending all of our big group programs with a poem. So I'm gonna share with you, to wrap us up today, a poem by a poet who I really love named Naomi Shihab Nye. And it just, I love this poem. It just makes me think so much about the conversation we've been having today about the small ways that we can contribute, and also the ways that we are really in all of this together. And this poem is called Red Brocade. The Arabs used to say, when a stranger appears at your door, feed him for 3 days before asking who he is, where he's coming from, or where he's headed. That way, he'll have strength enough to answer. Or by then, you'll be such good friends you don't care. Let's go back to that. Rice, pine nuts. Here, take the red brocade pillow. My child will serve water to your horse. No, I was not busy when you came. I was preparing to be busy. I was not preparing to be busy. That's the armor everyone put on to pretend they had a purpose in the world. I refuse to be claimed. Your plate is waiting. We will snip fresh mint into your tea. And I'm going to drop the link for that if you also enjoyed that poem. And everybody, we invite you to come off mute and say goodbye. And it was just so lovely to be here with you all.